It is possible that the most used word in the modern economy is empty shell. While the world fills up with sustainability pledges, global public debt reached $102 trillion. 3.4 people now live in countries that spend more on interest payments than on health or education. None of those numbers show up when someone says the word sustainable, or no yet. I am Eréndira Ramos, international human rights lawyer and creator of the Right to a Sustainable Economy, the legal framework that grounds sustainable economic governance. This is where we decode the systems of power, capital, and technology that shape your future. Now, think about where the word sustainable appears today. You might think on in the annual reports of corporations actively degrading ecosystems, in fiscal strategies accumulating debt the next generation will inherit, in funds financing the exact system they claim to want to transform. I have been in those rooms. Yes, I remember the feeling precisely. And, this impeccable room, coffee served with care, a presentation with the word sustainability on every slide. And that same week, I pulled the depth and extraction data for the region they were discussing, and the numbers said totally the opposite, always. The problem in that room, in my perspective, was the vocabulary. It has stopped measuring anything. When a word can attach to anything, it stops constraining anything. And in that vacuum, something predictable happens. Whoever holds the most resources fills it with the version that suits them. We know this. And a term that qualifies everything ends up changing nothing. When I was developing this research, I kept running into the same gap. The relevant institutions had already adopted sustainability as a goal. That's great. The environmental data kept getting worse. That is not. So the answer was in the word itself. Look at this. It comes from Latin, sustentare, to hold up, to bear the weight, to keep something standing across time. The standard living inside that word is the capacity of a decision, a system, a policy to hold across time without shifting its cost to the planet, to vulnerable populations or the generations that follow. And there is a distinction here that changes the entire analysis. Check out this. Sustainability is a condition. A process can be reported, a condition can be verified. If it is a condition, it depends on something measurable, the solvency and the legitimacy of the financial system that sustains human and planetary life over time. That is the definition I developed in my research on the right to a sustainable economy that now is published in important journals out there on international public law, like the Elgar Encyclopedia in the UK, Max Planck Institute of International Law. But the etymology arrives at that point. So that's the evidence. You can see it. Now, let's apply that definition to the actual structure of the global economy. Environmental degradation is a symptom, the most visible output of a financial system that needs continuous extraction to meet its payment obligations. And we have three conditions. Check out this. Monetary policy. When a currency loses purchasing power year after year, the incentive to shifts across the whole economy. Think about this way. You have a sack of seeds. You can eat the seeds today, or plant them and wait for the forest. And when the hunger sets in, you eat the seeds every time. That's normal, right? That is a time preference. When waiting costs you, the forest never gets planted. Holding a wetland, an aquifer, or forest becomes financially expensive. Converting it into immediate cash flow becomes rational. And the hunger, in this analogy, is debt. Now check the fiscal policy. In 2024, developing countries paid $921 billion in interest, a total record. Over the last decade, government interest payments grew 102%. Public revenues grew 39%. In Sub-Saharan Africa, governments now spend 18.7% of their revenue servicing external debt, 3 times than 2014 level. And all the data is out there. A government in that position needs foreign currency quickly and consistently. In resource-rich economy, the fastest mechanism is extraction. When I work with officials of these questions, the pressure I encounter is structural: debt governance, rating agency criteria, IMF conditionality. Those frameworks are more immediate than the environmental commitments sitting right next to them, even human rights. So for many countries, monetizing forests, hydrocarbons, and minerals is a practical condition for accessing international credit, even when it contradicts their own climate obligations and human rights obligations. And there is a direct legal consequence. When a state borrows long-term to finance current spending without a credible fiscal trajectory, it expropriates the future economic capacity of its citizens. That debt resolves in 3 ways: extract more resources, impose austerity, and debase your currency. All 3 push the cost forward. When a country has to choose between paying its creditors and funding its children's schools, what exactly is that being asked to sustain? Think about it. Now, technology governance. The same pattern is now accelerating in the digital economy. AI infrastructure, data extraction, energy consumption at a scale, compute concentrated in a handful of firms. Economic power concentrates fast, and no binding standard answers who it is sustainable for or for how long. So we have 3 spheres and 1 logic. Fiscal, monetary, and technological sustainability belong to the same conversation as environmental sustainability. Can you see this? Treat the symptom without the system, and the symptom returns. Here's the part that explains why this stayed invisible. International human rights law already recognizes what is needed. We have intergenerational equity is an established principle, non-regressivity obliges states not to roll back social rights or human rights in general. The duty to mobilize the maximum available resources sits in the Article 2 of the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. And even the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, in a recent advisory opinion, the 23, established a healthy environment as an autonomous right. The tools exist. The problem is where they apply. Macroeconomic policy has historically been treated as a matter of sovereign discretion, shielded from judicial scrutiny by doctrines like separation of powers or the political question. Picture a building with security cameras on every floor and 1 room with no camera, the room where the checks get signed. That is the current state of international economic law. This is where the right to a sustainable economy operates as a normative bridge that was missing. when in economic policy has a foreseeable, significant, and direct impact on economic, social, and environmental rights, it must be renewable against the state's obligations. What guests assess is whether the state acted with transparency, due diligence, and recent justification. The review verifies compatibility and leaves policy design where it belongs. And there is a proven mechanism for doing this. In Latin America, we have conventionality control. It's a doctrine that ensures that the norms and practice of the state are compatible with the American Convention. I spent 15 years inside that system. I wrote a book on that doctrine. I know exactly what it can do. Applied to budgets, to debt management, to central bank decisions, it becomes a review instrument that is missing. Latin America has it. The difference that I can see between a declaration and a standard is that a standard can be applied. The right to a sustainable economy rests on 8 criteria and in 2 groups. Let me tell. 4 procedural criteria examine how the decision was made. We talked about transparency, recent justification, participation, due diligence, that means foreseeable rights, impacts were identified before the decision, and we have 4 substantive criteria examine what the decision produces. We are talking about proportionality, non-discrimination, and distributive impact, right? Non-regressivity, and intergenerational equity. And the catalog is open. It's important to understand these criteria developed through jurisprudence and doctrine, which is how legal standards mature. And the standard is model neutral. It reviews the quality of a decision, never orientation of the measure, a fiscal consolidation program, and social expansion program can equally pass or fail this test. This is sustainable economic governance in practice. The institutional obligation that corresponds to the right is how I name it. And that changes who has to prove what. The institution making the decision has to show it met the standard. So this is already happening. If you make economic, budgetary, or investment decisions, these 3 affect you. July 2025, the Inter-American Court issues an advisory opinion on the climate emergency. It sets a highlighted due diligence standard and extends obligations to business enterprises. If your company operates in the Americas, that opinion includes you. In 2025, the International Court of Justice issues the advisory opinion of the obligations of states on climate change. That's unanimous, and that applied all over the world. And 2026, we have the Inter-American Commission with the resolution on fiscal policies and human rights. This is huge because they establish debt and central bank responsibilities. They need to be compatible with human rights. The argument that macroeconomic decisions are legally neutral is honestly getting harder to sustain. And by the next time you hear the word sustainable in a board meeting, a policy brief, a central bank announcement, there is one place to press. Sustainable for whom? And for how long? That is the standard. And now I want to hear from you. Where have you seen the word sustainable used in the most contradictory way? I would love to read your comments, and I'll be happy to share with you my right to a sustainable economy framework. It's in the comments below. Please, I'll be happy to see you in the next video.